it was amazing. I had to kick back and say, I can't believe we did that. Competence, character, commitment. Because if you're not consistent, trust breaks down. So you have to be consistent.
Greg Wooldridge, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure, Mark. Glad to be here.
Where does this podcast find you?
I'm in Vancouver, Washington.
You've got an incredible history, leading the Blue Angels, which for those in the audience who don't know what that is, it's one of the leading exhibition aerial performance teams in the U.S. You've done some amazing things throughout your career. I think a good place to start would probably be just having you walk us through where you got your start and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, I started out right out of college into naval aviation. I wanted to learn how to fly so I could have a career after I got out of the military. Flying. I wanted to fly for an airline. Let's be frank about it. And I had never flown an airplane until I got in the Navy. So that was my first exposure to it. But it was great, and I had some stumbles along the way, some good second chances. I didn't qualify my first time at the ship landing on an aircraft carrier. I disqualified, and then got told how to do it, by a great instructor, second opportunity, and did it more precisely, more like they wanted it. And again, you can imagine landing on an aircraft carrier demands the utmost of safety by a large cast of people that are involved. You got the deck crew and the pilots and the directors and the tower folks and people keeping the ship running to keep wind over the deck for landing and takeoff. So anyway, I qualified, went on to do some various tours in the Navy. One was to one of the most enjoyable. Actually, I did it twice. I was an adversary pilot, got a little training with Top Gun, and then went out and taught others how to win the day in the dogfight arena. I showed them how to do that, and that was quite rewarding. And of course, the tours I had flying off of carriers, frontline stuff, being ready to go when needed, and then finally. I got to lead the Blue Angels, got to command a Navy base, which was great. I got called back twice to lead the Blues, as return as the lead. And then I retired from the Navy and went to work for FedEx, a great company. Took some of the things I learned in the Blue Angels to FedEx, and we actually changed the safety parameters a little bit by bringing in some of the protocols that we had with the Blue Angels. So that's kind of an overview. About 15 years ago, I can't believe it's that long. About 15 years ago, I had a cardiac arrest, and it took me out of flying. 8 minutes of CPR kept me alive, and that's when I started going into the talking world, talking about what I learned, mostly from the Blue Angels and what that was all about. And
I think that it's important that you bring up that you were able to transition what you learned to a different space, right? In your case, being FedEx and bringing that over to their team. But for everyone listening, no matter what area or space they might be in, there really are lessons that are applicable throughout all industries, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the thing that FedEx had a great safety record, and we're talking about the early 2000s, and then we had a couple, 2 or 3 hull losses, where we have, either a hard landing, collapsed gear, or something like that, where there was just no common thread. And I know I'd like to get into the safety aspect because it's a beautiful thing that you do, but there was no common thread there. And so management, I was a line check airman. It's kind of a more senior position as an instructor and a check airman. And management just made a proclamation to those of us that were also in that management position what's going on? What are we doing? What can we do better? What do you see? And I went home that day, that night, and thought about the difference between how we did business at FedEx from what we did at the Blue Angels. The thing that came to mind was the debrief. So in the Blues, our debrief was about 2 or 3 times as long as the flight. Very thorough. You grow from that. You learn from that. You go into the debrief with a great deal of vulnerability, but it's strength and vulnerability, right? It's openness, talking about what you individually could have done better, what you might have done wrong in that day, that flight, and what you could do better. What I noticed about FedEx was, and about, I think, in all commercial aviation, you get done with a flight, the first thing you want to do is get on the crew bus, if it's the end of the day, and go to the hotel. And for us, with overnight flying, where you get in at 4 or 5 in the morning, you've been up all night, and all you want to do is draw the shades shut and pretend like it's nighttime for 6 or 7 hours so you can get some sleep. And so you shut the airplane down, jump out, get on the bus, go to the hotel. And I remember times laying there thinking, well, what happened on that? There was something on that flight that I didn't quite understand, right? So unlike in the Blues where you capture everything, we didn't capture anything of real significance that we could have. We could have grown from it. We could have learned from it. So I told the folks in training there at FedEx, I said, what if we added a debrief? And it doesn't have to be an hour debrief. It can be 2 minutes, 1 minute, where the captain leads the debrief and says, this is what I thought about the flight. It was pretty good. We had to dodge a couple thunderstorms, but I think we did a good job with it. But here's what I did wrong. So the senior most person opens up with their mistakes. They can be vulnerable. They can be accountable. They can be honest, open, and set the tone, right? They set the tone. And they talk about this is what I did wrong, and tomorrow when we fly back to Memphis or wherever it might be, you won't see this happen. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to take care of this, and I'm going to fix this error that I had tonight. So what is that, 30 seconds? And then the first officer, and then back in the day when they had second officers, gets to chime in too. Now it's mostly two crewmen in the crewmen and ladies in the front seats there. But the important thing was to capture the information so that you could get better, and it just wasn't happening. The FAA allowed it to be published on the checklist, which is hard to do, get the FAA to change, but they saw the value of it, and so it became part of a checklist item. But I thought that was really cool, taking that from the experiences at the Blues and bringing it to commercial aviation.
It's huge, and an effective debrief can really change a lot of things in a company and the way that we go about different procedures. And something that I really think is important that you bring up there is the topmost or most senior individual being honest and open about what they may have done incorrectly, and sort of earning buy-in would be a word to use to put it. When you're speaking to those individuals, those veterans, and maybe they come at it with a particular attitude or preconceived notions, and they're not wanting to admit their mistakes, how do you convince them, or convey to them the importance of really leading the charge in those conversations?
With changing the culture to where the CEO, the commanding officer, the captain on the flight, or whatever the situation may be, has an obligation to open up. And I think you change the culture, right? You take fear out of the debrief. You take fear out, and you interject honesty and openness. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while to get to that level of being able to do that with a comfort, right? The comfort in seeing what can happen, the growth that can occur. And it's not easy. It's not easy to make that change, but it certainly enhances the flying.
And it takes almost putting your ego to the side a little bit in a certain way. And
Absolutely, Mark. Yeah. I mean, you're saying, well, I screwed this up. Oh, how many people in charge want to say that or feel comfortable saying that? But it's so cool because then it lets those around you know that it's okay. It's okay to say what you could have done better, because a lot of times you leave an evolution, a flight, performance, whatever it is you're talking about, a sales pitch or a sales introduction of a new product or something like that. You leave that and you go, well, there were a couple things that just didn't go right. And if you don't have a way to mine those things, then you're never going to find out, or you're going to find out the hard way by something that's even this dramatic that you don't want to have happen. So if you have a way that you can do it, that is uncomfortable maybe at first, but once you get used to it, you will love that way of doing business, because you'll find the real answers. You'll find the hard answers through the people that knew what happened. Because you can say to yourself, wow, I don't know what happened. How did that happen? How do we, I guess I just have to live with it, right? And you don't have a way to fix it if you don't have an atmosphere, a culture where those things can be brought out.
And there's something to be said about this taking time. And I think that this can go in almost two directions. Something that I've heard from not just safety professionals, but really all industries, is that there can be, if things are not addressed the first day it happens, there's almost a drift that kind of occurs, whereby one small error can compound, and then it starts happening again and again and again. And just like you can go in a positive direction, if these things aren't brought up when they happen, that there can also be a drift in the other direction. So really, you get whichever way you choose, it's going to multiply over time, and it's going to go one way or the other. From what I've seen, have you kind of seen that in the places where you've been? Yeah.
Oh, and sometimes by debriefing, you move forward and get better, or you can pull back and go, oh, okay, it was a great idea at one point, but it seems like we need to step back and review how this is going. So there's ways to move ahead very positively, but also back up very positively, right? And regroup and discover what it is that's not going right. So, I mean, it's just a tremendous way to learn.
It is. Yeah. And I mean, everybody, I think, no matter what field you're in, no matter where you are, there's benefits to be had. Something that I want to dig into, and I think you're probably one of the best people to ask this, would be building trust under pressure. When you think of high performance teams and working in a high pressure, high risk environment, the Blue Angels are just about up there at the pinnacle of what that could really represent. When you're operating in those life or death situations, right, where everything has to go right, how do you go about building trust with your team?
Yeah. I think the debrief is a big part of it, first of all, because you can be open, you can be wide open, so you learn why something didn't feel right and didn't go right. So that is a big first step, and letting people be accountable without fear builds trust. Um, you have to have that high level of trust in the leader. The leader has to build that trust and has to be accountable, regardless of what happens. And also, I talk about the 4 C's of trust. One is credibility, not credibility, but competence, right? You're competent when you're trying to build trust. You have to sense the competence of the person you're working with, right? And you have to possess. Doesn't mean you're the ace of the base. You don't have to be the greatest fighter pilot in the world, but you need to be competent at what you do. The second C is character. You have that integrity, you have truth, you're truthful, right? And you're trustworthy. Of course, that it's part of trust is the character that you have. And then there's a commitment. You have that sense that there's a commitment here to be the absolute best that we can be as a team going forward. And all of these C's, you can mine them deeper, but these are kind of the easy parts to grab. So you've got competence, character, commitment, and then the fourth C that I like to talk about that is probably the most important is consistency. Because if you're not consistent, trust breaks down. So you have to be consistent. And I always tell people that doesn't mean you make or you expect the same decision every time or the same action, but what you do expect is that the values that are used to get to those conclusions, those decisions, those actions remain steady and predictable, right? And so when you have that, you have a great deal of trust. And then there's a couple other, in the world of the Blue Angels, a couple other C's. One is cadence. So the cadence has to be the same when you're talking about coming left. Okay, and on the K and K, your right wingman can turn into you without seeing you move because they know you're going to, on that K, that K and K, okay, you're going to start turning. So they'll start turning with you. So that's the cadence that they come to expect. And clear communications. Communications have to be clear and concise all the time. So a lot of C's, a lot of fun C's that can make up trust, that help trust develop and stay strong.
Essentially, what I've seen is over time, people in whatever industry they might be in, they tend to, once there's a certain lesson spoken about, let's say there's a debrief or a safety speaker that comes in, it's almost as if the next few weeks are great and then it falls off a cliff. There's a real lack of that consistency, as you mentioned. So being able to maintain that, I'm just curious, what are some of the key sort of tools or frameworks that you use to keep that lesson going well into the future?
To be real buy-in from the leadership, from whoever's leading it, and you have to be able to point out, the values that came out of the way you're doing business, and you're so spot on about you'll get a keynote or you'll get a presentation about something. Oh, I'm fired up, I'm ready to go, and you go on for a week or two, and then it's back to the bad habits again. And that's where whoever's leading that organization needs to make those changes occur and be on top of it and be encouraging it, and through the various ways you can do that, right? Ideally, it becomes part of the culture, but that takes a long time. So, you can have reminders, you can have a specific point person. Maybe it's your safety officer that says, we're develop a new acronym or something that highlights the way we are going to do business. That's a change going forward, and let's implement it. Let's get on with it. And then along the way, you have ways to prove that this works. Statistical change. That would be certainly a way to emphasize and amplify the value of what you've experienced from maybe someone from the outside or someone from the inside that says, hey, let's try something new here, and this is what we want to do, right? So that's where I think you can make it concrete.
Keeping track of those metrics over a longer period of time, like you said, is an absolutely phenomenal way to do it. And then obviously bringing those into the debriefs and really breaking it down for the team so that they get that reminder. Because, we're all prone to forgetting. Heck, I barely remember what I ate for dinner last night, right? So something that is also interesting about the Blue Angels is constantly every year you're getting new pilots, right? And there's this certain dynamic that comes up between the veterans and the new pilots whenever, and this doesn't just apply to pilots, but whenever you're bringing a new team member in, how do you, I guess, effectively work them into a culture and introduce them to your team so that they're effective going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. We have every year in that six-plane formation, there are three new pilots. Uh, One key factor in making that work is how you select people. So we selected new people based on their personalities, not on their flying skills, not on their ability to turn a wrench or whatever. It was about their level of humility, their desire to learn and grow. Those sort of things have to be there. You have to pick the right people in order to develop the teams you want. So we would get three new people, uh, take them with us out to El Centro, California in the desert in the wintertime and do winter training 6 days a week for 10 weeks. And many times two or three, perhaps three times a day flying to develop that trust and that ability in new people coming on. They were all pretty talented. I mean, they all have landed on carriers. You know, they have the flying skills. They come in with recommendations before we select them. So the selection process has a lot to do with the success of building a new team as people come in.
And humility is a absolutely, key part of what you just mentioned. I think beyond that, coachability. There's a certain reason, or things that I've seen where somebody can have all the experience in the world, but being adaptable, especially in that environment, is just, it's absolutely crucial. Um, so I think that there's a lot of, um, really, there's so many different lessons that can be pulled out of what you guys do. And I think that it was really neat to actually see all of that in the movie, that you were so central in getting made, the Blue Angels, which is on Amazon Prime. Highly recommend everyone go and watch that. What was the for you? What was it like seeing the actual flying and everything from an outside, almost a third perspective that you wouldn't normally get, versus being in the cockpit or being in the room? There's a sort of some of the shots were just incredible. So being able to see that, it must have been an interesting experience for you.
Oh, it was amazing. I had to kick back and say, I can't believe we did that. Because when you're doing it, it's a labor. You're laboring, you're working, you're trusting those people around you, and you don't really see what's happening. You see when we would debrief, we would see a lot of it through the videos that we had, of course, but and the way we talked about it. But you don't. Again, it's a labor of love, and you're just watching it to learn, and you're not really watching it to enjoy and be awed by it. And I think when we made the movie, it gave us a bunch of us an opportunity to see what's really going on there, and the techniques we used to film. The Sony Venice cameras, we filmed it for IMAX. The camera placements on the wings in the cockpit, all over around, and from the ground shots we had, and then using the Phantom camera, which can do thousands of frames a second, which is revolutionary. They could give us the slow motion shots, and in those slow motion shots, you can really capture a lot more than we ever could just watching the replays. And so, and from Kevin LaRosa, who is the flight coordinator for Top Gun Maverick and for our movie and many others. He's the best in Hollywood. For him to be in a helicopter, flying that helicopter as the Blue Angels flew, which I wasn't real sure that was going to work personally myself. I thought, well, there's going to be some maneuvers they're going to have to cancel as they go through the practice of the show. And they didn't. It just went smooth as silk. And because of Kevin's professionalism, but also because of his expertise, we got to see some things that we've never seen before, and it was just terrific. The movie is outstanding.
Special thanks to our sponsor, BIS Safety Software, one of the leading safety and compliance software applications on the market today. We wanted to shout out the team for their new Lone Worker technology, designed to provide enhanced protection and peace of mind for workers while they are working alone. It includes features like check-in schedules, automated notifications, and you can designate supervisors to receive alerts. This Lone Worker technology helps round out the full scope of their safety management software. Lone Worker is just the tip of the iceberg. See everything they have to offer at bissafety.ca.
When it sounds to me like there were a lot of lessons that you've taken in your career, and some real leadership and teamwork that went into this, right? And you talk so much about building strong teams, and it sounds like that was almost demonstrated in its full in putting together something that complex and that intricate in a way.
Yeah, the movie itself or the flight demonstration, both, right?
Both, yeah.
Yeah, the demonstration, of course, was there were a lot of people involved. You know, I mentioned 6 pilots and 3 new ones. Well, there were 10 other officers, and most of them had a 2-year stint. So every year you get 50% turnover in your performers, right? In your teammates, and that demanded that the selection process went well, and that we had a culture that created great trust and comradeship. Yeah, of course, and then we had not only 16 officers, but about 120 to 130 wonderful people that turned the wrenches and really made the airplanes ready for us to go, and fixed them when they needed to be, and did other jobs, administrative jobs and things like that, flight surgeon and maintenance and all those things. So go back to one of the words you used, humility. Humility was so crucial. We had to be humble, and part of that humility was necessary because we were ambassadors of goodwill, and we needed to have that spark every time we approached somebody, or somebody saw us in our blue suit and came up to us and said, "You're a Blue Angel," you know, and you go, "Oh, well, yeah." I was blessed with the opportunity, but you keep that humility because you want to be an ambassador of goodwill. So you have to be humble, and if somebody started to get out of line a little bit, we had ways to get them headed in the right direction. So it was good.
It's, and there's a certain, I guess, image when you think of a fighter pilot. It's not typically the most humble person on the planet, right? Usually there's an underlying, I would say, like a very confident energy that's obviously incredibly important. Balancing those two things out, and we see that in industries where the veterans of whatever it might be, construction, oil and gas, mining, anywhere really, you find that there's going to be, with the people who have maybe been there a little bit longer, or just naturally comes with the position, a certain, I guess, confidence that you have to be able to balance out with that hubris, right? And kind of find the middle ground. And from what I can understand, that middle ground is almost where you find peak performance.
Right, where you have that level of confidence that's very high, and competence that's very high, and character and commitment and consistency. All I get, rewinding those words, where that's very high, but also the humility is very high. So the middle ground is important. One thing you mentioned was the senior people, the ones that have been around for a while. What I see sometimes in industry is somebody has been in a job for years, and they're seen as this Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? The expert in that area. And sometimes, how do I say this? But sometimes people use that as a tool to emphasize their own importance, where in reality, if you're going to make those around you better, you need to be willing to share all the time. share your techniques that made you so good at what you do so that they can get better, rather than using that knowledge, that technique you have to empower yourself, right? So I see that too often. And it's something especially in the world of safety, you have to share those things, even though they may be part of your strength as you hold on to them, but it can be your strength too as you share them. You can be that important person that, hey, go see Joe. He can tell you how you can get that done or whatever.
There's a collective knowledge that, every organization has. And this is something that I've been thinking about recently is, the concept of your 10,000 hours, right, in flying. But there's going to be those who have much more experience in certain aspects than others. In an organization collectively, there's how many hundreds of years of experience. I think what you're tapping into there is that if there's a real potential to learn from collectively everyone's experience and harness that. But there's also on the opposite side, what are we missing out on by not talking to or those individuals who do have that experience, not sharing that with the rest of the team? There can be some real almost gaps there or missed opportunities.
And there's techniques to get that done. The debrief that I talked about is one way to ensure that the word gets out on how to get better and change our belief levels within the organization or within individuals or teams. You can elevate the beliefs by making sure you understand what we learned from that last evolution. And there's a thing I talk about, a diamond performance framework that has 4 key factors. One, and it starts out with your personal beliefs, what you believe you can do and how you believe maybe our team can do better. So let's look at this. Let's look at these beliefs. Now, do we take those beliefs? Do we get the buy-in from those around us to say, let's take what we've learned, what we know, what we believe we can do, or what I believe we can do, and take it into the process of performing with that belief, at that belief level. So you take those individual beliefs and you go down and you talk about it in a briefing on about what you're about to do. It could be a product introduction, it could be anything, or a building site, building a bridge, or laying pipe or whatever, and all those various worlds where safety is crucial. And you talk about it and how you're going to take what you believe you can do, how well you believe you can do, and talk about it, and get that established amongst the whole team that's going to make it happen. Then you perform, and then you debrief. And when you debrief, that's when you capture elements that can actually raise your beliefs again. So you go back around this, it's not a circle the way we do it, it's more of a square or a diamond, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of ways to get better. And I think the way we did it in the Blues was an example of that.
And ultimately, it's a self-powering engine in a way. Once you get that momentum going, it can kind of, and you find this all over with so many things, but you can really start to see the snowball effect almost in a way as it's rolling down the hill. Something that I want to dig into a little bit is the Blue Angels practice of visualization. And I think where this really branches into not just your space, but also the safety world is in those high stakes situations, picturing what are the procedures, what are the steps that we need to take to make sure that we're ensuring success when it's most crucial. Can you speak a little bit more about the visualization tools that the Blue Angels used?
Visualization comes into play specifically in the briefing, talking about how we're going to get something done. It could be if you're laying pipe, it could be on a daily basis how we're going to, take that trench, that ditch down the road, and what obstacles and what things we're going to run into out there. We're going to mitigate that risk. But with the Blues, when we were flying, we visualized how we're going to do everything, right? So the guys would close their eyes, a lot of them, and think about what they're looking at on my airplane as they fly formation on me. And they're going to say, okay, this is what I'm going to be seeing. And I I am briefing them, and the visualization can be done because I'm saying what's going to happen exactly as they're going to hear me say it in flight. So I'm going to say, coming left, okay. And they're thinking, okay, I'm watching these cues on the boss's airplane. A little pull, and then you take your hand and you move like you're moving the control stick toward you. A little pull, easing the pull, rolling out to diamond roll. So they hear that cadence, right? And they can visualize exactly what they're going to do. There's an older documentary called Blue Angels Around the World at the Speed of Sound that was done in the 90s. It was centered on us going to Moscow to fly a show there, but about 8 other European countries in 1992. But Rob Stone made it, and it was an award-winning documentary. It's still on Netflix, but it does a deep dive on that visualization, on that briefing process. If anybody wants to see a good example of visualization, that's a great movie to watch to capture that part of the movie.
We'll be sure to include all of the links down below here, and there's so many incredible cinema pieces and articles and documentaries about it, because it's it really is an iconic team. So you did have to come back into the organization multiple times. I guess at each different stage, did you see your leadership skills and your ideas around leadership changing with each progressive time? Was there, I guess, an evolution in that sort of space?
Of course, yeah, because I knew what could be done and what couldn't be done. So I had a confidence each time I came back. I had a different level of confidence, right? So that allows you to make decisions based on your experience. A lot better decision making, if you will. Sometimes that having done it before, I like to kid about the fact that I had 3 opportunities to get it right? Three different leading times. So you do learn from that, sure. You learn from it and you get better. As your confidence gets stronger. I used to flying air shows. I wouldn't take advantage of opportunities. I remember one time, like after we flew and debriefed, I wouldn't do anything after that other than go to the social events we usually had. But one time, there was a fella named Les Shockley who had a jet truck called Shockwave. It was a jet-powered, flame shooting ground vehicle. And he offered me a ride. And usually I would have said, no, I've got to go debrief. And the guys around me, because this is like my 3rd time leading the team, they said, oh, boss, go ahead. It'll be fun. We want to hear about it. We want to hear it. And so I did it. And so there's a comfort level, too, that comes with the repetition of doing something and having that leadership opportunity. A comfort level in that, you're not abusing your position, but you're showing those around you that leadership can be a lot of fun, without being a bad guy or somebody that puts too much pressure on.
Without being hard on your team. There's I guess a certain pressure that can be put on leaders to behave a certain way, and an expectation that people will only respect you if you, I guess, not speak down to them, but speak with a certain level of separation that I think can fundamentally be injuring to a team's morale long term. When it comes to making decisions, you brought up that this was something that you feel you improved over time, was your decision making skills. What are some of your strategies for making those high stakes decisions where the outcome really does matter?
One of the most important things is to get expert opinions, get thoughts of those that have lived in that world if it's something you're not too familiar with. Uh, get kind of have folks you can trust and get their thoughts on it before you make a decision. Find out from the people that, as a leader, you don't always have the expertise in something. Make sure you have somebody that you can trust to run stuff by. I think that's crucial. Trust your instincts. You're going to get some feedback where you're going to get early feedback that's, oh, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. It's not going to work. Well, you're in that leadership position because you've proven that you can make good decisions. So you look at what's about to be decided upon, and you have to put in your own expertise, your own considerations for the potential outcomes. What if this goes south? What's going to happen? What if it works? What's going to happen? And of course, as a leader, always when things work well, you reflect that on those that work for you and not on yourself. But when things go wrong, as a leader, you take the responsibility for that action and deflect it from the people that work for you. But at the same time, you go out and figure out how we could have done it better. Yeah, there's so many things about leadership that are fun and challenging.
It is, and I think it's a continuously something that you never stop growing into, in a way, no matter what stage. And, whether you're coming back for the third time to lead a team, or you've been there for however long, there isn't a stop or a time where that ever stops, or where you cease to learn, at least if you want to be successful and kind of reach your full potential. This is a question that I like to ask all of our guests. Obviously, you've had an amazing career, from the Navy, leading the Blue Angels, now to speaking and sharing this message. What would you say, Greg, you would like your legacy to be?
Yeah, that's good. Well, I would like, it's kind of hard because I've leaned on my legacy. It's kind of hard to say I would like to be looked on as someone who was humble, average, but blessed with some opportunities and some really wonderful people around me that surrounded me and kept me out of trouble, right? And as someone who recognized the people around them and made people the number one priority in their growth and their care and feeding, if you will. One of the things that I get asked, Mark, is what would you have done differently? And this is important too. And this is not what I would be remembered for, but maybe I would in a negative fashion. And that was, what would I have done differently? I would have prioritized my family. I would have made them my number one priority in everything. And I didn't do that. It's hard to admit that, but I wasn't very good at that. I almost focused too much on work, and it wasn't always just productive work. It was just getting to fly and have fun flying, I would have concentrated more on my family. I would have been a better officer, a better leader, and those around me would have learned from that example and been better family members and fathers and mothers, and taking care of the kids or their friends or whatever it might be. So and that's what I wish I had done, and I could have enjoyed that part of having led the Blue Angels 3 times as also being a great family man and a great father. And I wish that could have happened, but it didn't. And now all I can do is talk about it and hope others will learn from it.
Well, it highlights the importance of, and nobody's perfect by and far, building a strong team. And, whether that might be your coworkers, the team you're in, or at home, right? There's a real, like you said, a power to having people around you that can support you and building a strong team. And I think, even if there's some things that you might have done differently, I think your ability to clearly communicate why these things are important, I'm sure will kind of get the message out to those who might be listening, and that's going to click right in a way. So you never know who's going to really take that to heart, and whether it's in their organization, in their personal life, it really extends far beyond just your own story, I guess, that way.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. That's, I was just blessed with some great opportunities, and I wish I could knock the rough edges off and have done it better. And I think all of us do that when we reflect on where we are and what we've done in life. A lot of people around you or that hear of you or see you, all they see is this image of what that person has done. They don't get to see the behind the scenes things that could have gone better. And I just want people to learn from the things that I did.
Well, you know what? I mean, you're talking about walking the talk. I mean, this is a great debrief in and of itself about being honest and bringing that to the forefront. I think you're very clearly demonstrating what you're teaching, right? And I think that's crucial for everyone to really look at and appreciate. Greg, I want to thank you again for coming on and sharing your message. Where can people find you, what you're up to? You've got a LinkedIn, of course. We'll include all the links here.
I work with a guy that used to be one of my wingmen, John Foley, and he's got a company called johnfoleyinc.com, and now I'm one of his wingmen. There's 3 or 4 of us that speak, including John. He's one of the most demanded speakers in the country and one of the top 10. But you'll see, you can find me on that website, johnfoleyinc.com. You can communicate with me directly, anytime, anywhere, through my email, which is just my old Navy call sign, rugdance@comcast.net. And that was from getting called on the carpet so many times and then shuffling my feet in front of the boss's desk, the commander's desk. That was called a rug dance, and I did way too many of them. Again, pushing the limits sometimes, and
I was so curious where because I was looking at that email itself when you sent it over to me, and I was curious where that had come from. Now I'm glad that I fully understand.
Yeah, we could go on and on, but but those are a couple ways to get a hold of me. Yeah,
Perfect.
and just Google me, and you'll see some of the stuff that I was blessed with the opportunity to do. So.
Yeah, and be sure everyone to check out the Amazon Prime film, The Blue Angels. Can't recommend it enough. Absolutely phenomenal work. Greg, thank you again for coming on the show.